Okay, the reason I'm making this video is basically it's about NTCC and the New World Order. The One World Government, they may call it. If you look on the back of your $1 bill, Novus, I think it says Novo Ordem Seclorum. It's in Latin. It means basically New World Order, a new secular world, or new secular order. I'm not going to give a whole rundown on what the New World Order all stands for, but my theory on it is that the Catholic Church is behind it. That's not my own personal, I'm not the only one that thinks that, but you do enough research, it pretty much links it back to that. If you read the book of Revelation, chapter 17, about the great whore, it says right on her forehead, Mystery Babylon. The color is scarlet and red, same colors as the Catholic priests use on a lot of their garments. It's so clear. Babylon, you can see the Babylonian Baal symbolism in their form of worship. Anyways, you'll have to do the research on that. Okay, it took me a long time to learn about what's going on with the New World Order, One World Government, how Satan is behind it, and the theory that's pretty well substantiated through a lot of people's collected research. It's not just a bunch of crazy people talking about Martians or something. It has nothing to do with Martians. It's got nothing to do with, if anything, there's just a few people that point out how that some of the government wants you to believe that there may be Martians out there, but not that the conspiracy theorists think that there's Martians out there. There may be a sect out there that does think that, but just like in any movement, you got people that take something off to the wayside somewhere. The main conspiracy theory is that and from what I researched, the Catholic Church is as simple as this: they're trying to take over the world. It's the devil behind it, of course. The woman that rides the beast in Revelation chapter 17. It's symbolic of the Baal, Babylonian religious order and whole economy of Babylon, and secular world government, kings and their inhabitants working in unison, or submitting actually to that the fornication of Babylon, or the Baal worship, the same worship that the Jews kept going into, and they kept not serving God and actually instead serving Baal, because it was full of all kinds of fornication, temple prostitutes, and wickedness. A lot of real fun, sinful, evil, wicked stuff in their minds. Fun, but not nice in God's eyes, of course. But the conspiracy theory is that it's that religion, that whole economy. I'm not talking about economy of money-wise. I'm talking about the whole order, the whole system of Babylon and Baal worship. That whole economy is found, they say, in in the Catholic religion. The woman, Semiramis, or the Queen of Heaven, they just call her Mary, but it's really it's not Mary. Mary never told us to invoke her. Jesus never told us to invoke her. You know all that if you're an NTCC. But I'm telling you that the Queen of Heaven is in the book of Jeremiah. Okay, it's linked back to the same religion that the Jews kept stumbling into. Not stumbling as if you trip and fall into it, but stumbling. That word stumble means to sin, or to stop serving someone, stop believing and obeying and following someone. They kept stumbling upon Baal. They kept going into Baal and committing fornication spiritually with Babylon and Baal. Why do you think they went into captivity into Babylon? Baal was Babylon's religion. Many people have traced it back to the Tower of Babel in Babylonia, established, many say, they interpret the scriptures in Genesis chapter 10, I think, that Nimrod established that kingdom of Babylon. Alright, so the religion is still alive and well You know, it's still going. You can find it in the Catholic Church, and you can find it in certain flags of nations, and especially in the United Nations, okay? You think your governments are a bunch of Christian nations, England and America, they're just good Christian nations. They all love God, and all their presidents and leaders are just good Christian men. All the leaders throughout history were all good Christian men, because you can find quotes that, you know, Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Jefferson or this one or that one. You know, I got a quote right here in my favorite American book of history that this one, George Washington said this about God. Is such a good Christian. But then you can find a bunch of atheistic statements and agnostic statements made by many of the same people that you quote to show that the founding fathers were Christian. Alright, so flash forward to today. Everybody loved Bush because he said he was a Christian. He's always standing up for being a Christian, and yet all this stuff's going on. We're going to war. No explanation of why. You know, oh yeah, I got bad intelligence. You know, they told me. But they say that he's the one that asked them to find intelligence on Iraq and on Saddam. He pressured them to find him intelligence on Saddam. Then, when they found out, when they went to war, there's no weapons of mass destruction, he says, oh, I got bad intelligence. Well, you asked them you told them to find something on him. You were pressuring them. That is what they're saying, anyways. The people that were in the top level positions, they've come forward and said all this. You know, Bush isn't going to say that. But you had the 9/11, the towers that fell, but nobody knows about Tower 7 unless you've done some in-depth research into the matter. They're not going to talk about it at the anniversary to commemorate the dead every year on September 11th. They're going to talk about, how did you feel on that day? What were you doing on that day? What went through your mind? All this emotional garbage, but they're not going to research it. They're not going to investigate. Because why? Because the media, they say, is controlled. America is not going to let, the government's not going to let, or the government's behind the government of America is not going to let you know what's going on unless you do some research. Okay? You think it was just Muslims, and that's it, end of story. And then, but how come they say Osama bin Laden denied that he did it? Why would a terrorist who does terrorist acts to terrorize people, then, you know, in order to, for a purpose, to make a statement and all these things, why would he then turn around and say, it wasn't me? You know, what was the point? And why did you do it if you weren't going to claim to have done it? You know, so, anyways, you know, nobody knows about Tower 7, the tower that fell. But, I mean, people do know, I'm being facetious, but the vast majority of people, if you ask about towers, they say, oh yeah, the 2 towers fell, of course. Well, you ask them, what was Tower 7? Do you know about that tower that fell hours later, just like a demolition job? It just fell straight to the earth. How come it's the furthest one out of the group of buildings that made up the World Trade Center? See, it wasn't just two buildings that made up the World Trade Center. There's a bunch of them. Tower 7 was the furthest one from that that group of buildings, and yet it came crashing to the earth in just a few seconds, just because it had a couple scattered fires and a little bit of damage from the tower. Buildings, you know, if you ask people in a fire department, you know, they know. Steel buildings don't just crash down like they're made out of just nothing but concrete, and it's just a bunch of concrete exploding and falling on top of each other. Talking about a steel frame building. It had a steel core in the middle. You telling me it pancaked down? What about the steel central core that was made out of thick steel? All right. Okay, so you're telling me it just fell down to the earth from a plane? Both of them. And the people that were warned, and the country didn't know it was going to happen, and they were just like, everybody was on vacation that day or something. They're out doing special ops, like activities. They were doing like war games, and they didn't know that it was real when they heard that it happened. Same thing with Pearl Harbor. They're out doing war games, and they were like, "Oh, is this real? Are we really being attacked? Is this real, or is this part of the war game?" You know, they somehow, you know, never know what's going on. They just somehow got lucky. Just like every murder takes place, there's always just some crazy guy. The guy that killed JFK, oh, he's just some crazy guy. The guy that killed Abraham Lincoln, just some nut. The kid that went into a theater recently and at the Dark Knight movie, just some nut. The guy that shot all the little kids recently. During the same time that Obama's trying to take away the weapons from people. Oh yeah, he was just some crazy guy. Okay, so you guys are the conspiracy theorists for thinking that there's no conspiracy. You guys are the conspiracy nuts, thinking that it's just a bunch of crazy people doing all this stuff. You're the ones that must have had a lobotomy if you believe all that. Okay, so something I believe is going on, and I'm pretty well aware. I'm pretty well informed. Are you? Have you at least researched it, or do you just say, "Oh, I just a bunch of conspiracy," because your pastor said, "Oh yeah, a bunch of conspiracy nuts think that happened." That's what Reverend Malsingh told me when I tried to tell him about it. Oh, a bunch of nuts. So that's why I came loose on him. I let him know, a hireling sees the wolf coming, does not warn the sheep. You should at least tell the, have you done it? He didn't even know what Tower 7 was. He's like, Tower 7, he didn't even know. He didn't know about the central core. He hasn't even researched it, but he just wants to call them all nuts. Before you call someone a nut, you should research it and see, why are they a nut? Are they really making stuff up? Are they talking about Martians in outer space and lizard people or something like that? Or are they actually talking about verifiable facts that people have researched, and there's documents and all kinds of stuff to show it? Now, anyways, back to NTCC. I went to visit Malsingh's church in Hawaii, and he starts talking about, he's only got 30 minutes to preach about the Lord Jesus Christ, salvation, heaven and hell, because that's the requirement. You got to preach in about a half an hour, That's pretty much the standard, that's pretty much the norm, half an hour. And, you think that within that 30 minutes, because it's the only time some people come to church is on Sunday, that you'd be leading people to Christ, leading them to heaven, showing them the way, convicting of sin, convincing people of their sin, warning them about hell, imploring them to seek heaven. But no, what's he do? He starts telling them about martial law. He starts talking about how you better control your kids because the martial law is going to get them. I'm like, wow, he's mentioning the martial law. He knows about that. He knows about the martial law. He knows what's going on. How that the country is headed, many people believe, towards martial law. And he even verified in his own message that he even sees that coming. And yet he's not alarmed by that? That might be bad? He just says, oh, like it's going to happen. It's going to happen. The martial law, he says it's going to get them. He doesn't say may get them. He says the martial law is going to get them. As if he's foretelling the future. There's no martial law really now, except for like at Katrina in the South, when they started busting down doors and taking people's weapons because there was a state of emergency. They waited and waited for it to become a real state of emergency, and just chaos breaking out. You're talking about the place where they have Mardi Gras every year, a bunch of ungodly people, and they wait for it to become a mess, and then they finally step in and say, oh, we got to kick everybody's doors down, take everybody's weapons, because look at the mess this place is. So, and there's even a report of this woman who was actually being raped repeatedly. This man came on a talk show, and he was saying he was part of the military operation and went there to seize people's guns, and he was saying that he saw this woman crying. He found out that the police there were the ones raping her over and over again. So you see, you think the government is doing you a favor by coming in and instituting this martial law. You better think again, all right? You think the martial law is going to help you, and then Reverend Malsingh's thinking he's trying to condition people, you see. This is what my belief is on that. He mentioned the martial law, and he paused and repeated it. He's like, the martial law is going to get them. The martial law is going to get them. What's that? Repetition is a good teacher, right? So in my mind, he's trying to, from what it looks to me, instead of talking about heaven or hell, instead of saying, you better teach your kids, raise them up as Christians, or else they're going to end up going to hell when they grow up, he's warning them in a Christian sermon about the martial law is going to get them. What's that got to do with being saved? What's that got to do with salvation? So you can see how they're slipping little things in their sermons. And after the message, all right, I was reading something online about, and I wasn't even certain, I don't know how I came across this, but it was right after I had gone to that church. It was not long after I see this thing. This guy was saying that he had asked his pastor, because he said he was concerned because he had heard that FEMA, which is, you got to look that up, that's in the government, they're the ones that can take over everything. If there's a catastrophe, a hurricane, or whatever, they're the ones that are supposed to step in and usurp all the authority and take control of all the resources, water and everything, electricity. They can do whatever they want. They can take usurp everything and just take control, okay? Never mind the balance of power and all that, the three-party system, or three-branch system of government. You know, the FEMA would just come in and say, kick the door in to that state or that area and say, we're in control. It's a state of emergency. So if you think that the government won't fabricate an emergency just to be able to rip your Constitution in pieces, which they're already working on doing, think again, all right? So listen to what I'm saying. Malsingh starts talking about martial law, he says the word twice, get it to stick in real good, and this guy is talking on the internet. He's saying that he had gone to his pastor in a different church organization saying, hey, I heard that FEMA is paying pastors to start conditioning people, their congregants, to accept the martial law, to be conditioned to accept it when it comes, and to not revolt, to not question it, to just accept it when it happens. When martial law, when the military, that's never was intended to be used against its own citizens, turns on you, citizens, especially Christians, because we know that judgment is going to begin in the house of the Lord, you watch. When you get arrested or detained for not for committing a crime, but for speaking out against the government, or committing a thought crime, or because somebody thought you might do something bad because of something you said to someone, or because of a way that you believe that's anti-government or not in line with the Babylonian economy of the governments of the world, when you get detained indefinitely, which is already in place in your government, thanks to George Bush. Don't ask what the law name is, but just look it up, George Bush and indefinite detainment camps. He brought that into the government during his tenure, as far as I can remember, George Bush Sr. Or no, that was Obama. Bush took away. Bush did away with, I think, posse comitatus. He brought in rules and legislation that can allow the government to step in and usurp the Constitution, take away our freedoms and our privacies and all these things. He made steps toward it too. Don't ask me all the technicalities. I know what I've read. I don't have it all memorized, but I know there's all this legislation that they've been working on little by little. Not just the Democrats, okay? The Republicans and the Democrats working together. And you fascist Nazis, or you fascists. That's okay. My wife called me while I was in the middle of recording that. Okay, so you think that the government would never do something like that on purpose, okay? But that's the conspiracy theory, and that's what I'm looking at NTCC, kind of funny kind. Now, especially after that sermon by Reverend Malsingh, talking about martial law, you know, in a Christian service, that when they always talk about how, oh, we're not supposed to talk about politics in church. I'm not politicking, you say, but now they are. Now they're doing something kind of funny. And I believe that they're either on the FEMA payroll, or it's because they're an incorporation. And there's a lot of things they're saying about churches that get incorporated, that the government now is going to want. The whole thing was a hoax, is what they're saying. That people went for it, churches went for it, in order to be tax exempt. You know, they took the gift, the tax exemption. They want to be incorporated. They want to have that tax exempt status. They want to be legally recognized by the state in case somebody were to ever say, "Hey, are you really tax exempt? Because we're going to arrest you if you're not." So they wanted to be able to, you know, prove that they're tax exempt because of the love of money. And so now you got your tax exempt status, you got your incorporation status. You're all good and happy, but now the government's saying, okay, you want to keep your tax exempt status? Help us do what we want to do. Back up into this driveway. Alright, so I'm going to stop it right there. You have yourself a nice day now.